Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some ProRevenge. Please check out the KCC Discord linked in the description down below. There you can talk to me and a whole bunch of KCC fans who hang out there on a regular basis. I look forward to seeing you there. Our first story today comes to us from Crafty Bureaucrat. I orchestrated a vast conspiracy to get a coworker fired. Let's jump right in. Using a throwaway because the details are specific and hard to change. I used to work at a hospital data center in the network operations group. We physically sat in a room 24/7 next to the servers to make sure things didn't catch on fire, monitored for alerts, and did routine things like swap out tape backups. But it was pretty simple work. This was ostensibly a tech job, but there were people who had been there for many years back when you had to change out printer paper and run a command from an IBM mainframe. It was on really specialized hardware and software that was difficult to apply elsewhere, so it had become a dead-end job. And because there were people who weren't tech savvy at all really, we weren't given much responsibility. You can't tell some people they can log into a server and others not. So we were reduced to the lowest common denominator. We were a network operations center where nobody was allowed to interact with any network equipment. Lowest common denominator, you say? Meet my new supervisor, Karen. Not her real name, but definitely her real spirit. Had been there for over 20 years and got the job solely based on seniority. She was a sociopathic narcissist and one of the most unpleasant people I've ever encountered. Shortly after I was hired, we were bought by another hospital and combined data centers. Karen was demoted to shift lead and had to work with us in the 24/7 rotation. She was very bad at her job, and our responsibilities diminished to very little. We had no agency to fix any problems of our own because it had to be a problem that Karen could solve, and Karen was both lazy and stupid. After a couple of years, I was promoted. On my first day after they announced the promotion, she said, "You will fail," just straight to my face. But she had a powerful tool at her disposal, the hospital bureaucracy. Since the place was unionized, the hospital had a just cause firing policy instead of an at-will policy, even for non-unionized employees. This is, I think, generally a good thing. But on the edges, it set up ridiculous situations where it was impossible to lose your job unless you were really egregious about it, with repeated violations or you showed up drunk or high. We had someone steal computer equipment and they kept their job. It was nuts. And Karen had been there for nearly 30 years, so she wasn't getting fired without a lot of work. That's okay, she was terrible at her job. One of the most important things about the job was monitoring for an alert which would pop up, and there was a procedure we had to go through in order for some data to go through. If we didn't do this, then a nurse wouldn't get their lab results back. So in one case, an alert came in, Karen saw it, then decided to keep browsing the web. Because of this, a patient from the cardiac ICU was going into surgery, and the doctors and nurses operating on the patient couldn't get a white blood cell count, I think. I'm not a doctor, I just work in a building with a lot of them. Something very dangerous for this patient, and the patient died. This still did not get Karen fired. The reasoning from HR, well, it didn't directly lead to harm. She didn't even feel bad about it, just a complete soulless sociopath. I'm real pro-worker in general, but some jobs you just absolutely have to do. I was so mad. She had to go. I kept a paper trail of everything she messed up on. It wasn't nitpicky, literal life and death stuff here. Verbal warning, first written warning, second written warning, final written warning, termination. A slog, and I'd rather spend my time doing anything else, but that's the way it went. Then, she figured out she could work the system. As she approached work Armageddon, termination, she would tell HR she was being harassed. The person harassing her was different every time, which would trigger a mandatory investigation. This investigation took about 6 months. They wouldn't find anything and we would carry on. Except these warnings, they had a 6-month expiration, so she could always reset the clock when it got close. Everyone was helpless. Even the CIO couldn't do anything about it because of the bureaucracy. Karen was a menace, and the entire IT department had to interact with the data center staff, and that meant interacting with her. And she was universally disliked, and she had 20 years until retirement, and she would outlast the heat death of the universe. Then I had an idea. What if, under the guise of developing skills relevant to the 21st century, required everyone working in the Network Operations Center to pass the Net Plus exam? It's not a difficult exam, but it's not trivially easy. I felt pretty sure that everyone on the team fell above the line between able to pass and not able to pass, except Karen. We would give everyone better titles, a significant pay raise, and entrusted to do more with the equipment, which is something everyone desperately wanted. Then, people could actually leave the hospital with transferable skills and do something else if they wanted and not feel trapped. I spent 3 years in meetings with HR, with my director, with the CIO, with HR again, job description meetings that took 6 hours to tweak small wording, hundreds of hours in meetings, red tape hell, absolute red tape hell. Do you have any idea what it takes to approve a significant raise in a bureaucratic muck factory like that? But the raises were crucial because it would absolutely not be fair to ask this of them. Pass a test or lose your job without a large carrot attached would lead to mutiny. And then it got approved. I also wrote the exam requirement into my own job description. It was important to still be able to do the job and not let my skills lapse just because I was promoted. Also, this meant I could cover for people when they were on vacation or sick. Plus, I also got that sweet pay bump. It went over well. I was nervous, but the plan made sense and I was able to communicate that. People would be more marketable, the job would be more interesting, and most importantly, they would be making 20% more than they were before. And I think it really helped that I also gave myself the same requirement when I absolutely could have chosen not to. The hospital would pay for off-site training. They would still get paid their full hourly during the training, including shift differential for second and third shifts. We paid for all the materials. I scheduled 8 hours a week for people to go to someplace quiet and study. The job itself had a ton of downtime so people could study, but this was formally carved out time anyway. We paid for the exam, and if they failed, we'd pay for the second attempt. We were given 8 months to pass the test, so this is how it was for the 8 months. I did not want Karen to have any excuse whatsoever, and somehow convince HR that this process was rushed or unfair. Everyone passed on the first attempt except Karen. Karen did not pass her second or third attempt, a bonus attempt. Karen, being the classic narcissist, thought this was somehow all about her, that this was a vast conspiracy engineered over multiple years and hundreds of hours just to get rid of her. And she would tell everyone within earshot that's what was going on. Yeah, okay, Karen, you realize how insane that sounds, right? Not everything is about you, sheesh. Well, okay, in this case it is, but still, only I and 2 other people know that. I remember the exact time and date we told her. She was in such deep denial that it could ever happen. She thought she was bulletproof. I don't think I will ever achieve anything more satisfying in my career. I'm not usually one to take satisfaction in seeing someone's livelihood go, but she was uniquely awful. She was a patient danger, and it had been nearly a decade of working with her by this point, and I was just so sick and tired of her BS. I was a hero the day after she was fired. I went to the main office for a meeting and people were congratulating me like I had just had a kid or won a marathon or something. Even the CIO. They were just happy for me that I didn't have to supervise Karen anymore. But in my headcanon, they were congratulating me for pulling off this elaborate plan. Morale back at the data center was also high. We learned interesting things. A couple of my coworkers left for better gigs elsewhere. The ones who were content staying were able to stay, and we all had more money and job security. And because anything could set off a BS Karen harassment complaint, people were stressed out working with her. Her being gone was like a breath of fresh air. Newcomers were told stories of Karen, and they seemed exaggerated. They were not. In order to solve a very important and extremely difficult problem, I pulled off a vast workplace conspiracy that improved the lives of the people I worked with in addition to keeping our patients safe. Getting Karen fired is my greatest and most difficult accomplishment, and I can't put it on a CV anywhere. Now, there were a whole bunch of comments after this story about the fact that Karen didn't get fired after causing the death of a patient. But there was also another comment down there from a doctor. It says, "I'll bite and say Karen's not on the line for that one. No matter what the test was, if it wasn't ready by the time she went into cardiac surgery, it's up to the surgeon to decide whether to proceed or not. Not Karen's fault on that one, but I don't know about the others." To cap this one off completely, we'll just go with a quote from Oscar Wilde. "Some bring happiness wherever they go, others whenever they go." Do me a quick favor and take a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're actually not subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. This next story comes to us from Objective Unknown. Pops makes dirty thieves literally eat crap. Let's jump right in. I have really loved sharing stories about my pops, my grandfather, the man who raised me, and I thought I would share another story of Pops just being Pops. Pops lived on the family farm his entire life, and that's where this takes place. It's mine now. The farm itself is huge, 80 acres of grazing and hay production land. Pops mostly raised cows and chickens and another 120 plus acres of forest, marsh, and wetlands. Up near the main house, Pops had his veggie and berry garden. Strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, all the berries. Pops liked to make his own homebrew, blame the Irish DNA. One fine summer morning, August of 2001, Pops is returning from town and he is greeted by a couple in their 30s hauling butt to their car, parked at the front of our property, each with 40-liter buckets. Pops checked out what had been going on. Almost half the berry bushes had been stripped clean. Pops was not the type to fly off the handle, but he took a trip to town to look for the car, and he found it. It was a couple out-of-towners, and Pops gave them a stern warning not to come back. The next morning, Pops was doing his normal start-of-the-day routine, make breakfast, wake me up to do chores. After we got out, Pops saw them again hauling butt back to their car. Pops jumped into his truck, caught up to them, and told them off, said if they ever come back, it's going to be hell for them. We woke up the next day to find tire tracks on the field and each and every berry bush stripped clean. We later found out they'd been hitting up farmers markets selling fresh berries. Pops not being the kind of person to take things laying down, especially if someone's effing with his future booze. There's a lot Pops did to ensure he was protected for the future, but I'm going to give you the short version. Pops decided to expand his berry operation to the entire field, as well as get the farm licensed to produce and sell berries. And early September, I remember this well, made me do half the work. We filled the entire front field, planted several hundred strawberry, raspberry, blackberry, blueberry bushes. One thing, they are perennial plants. The season they are planted will be very light fruiting, but the next growing season they explode. Pops fenced off half the field and left a good portion open to easy access. Pops knew they would be back next year. He knew they believed they found a golden goose, free money. Well, the start of next growing season, Pops had a special fertilizer ready for the open part of the field, raw human waste. Now, the thing about spraying the soil and plants with that is it's not treated. Even cow fertilizer is treated. But in its raw state, the plants being sprayed daily, well, it will make the berries putrid. It gets deep into them, and no amount of washing will get it out. And Pop sprayed every bush on the not fenced-in side every darn day and waited. And as Pops predicted summer of 2002, they came back. He caught them again, buckets in hand, hauling butt back to the car. Again, Pops confronted them with a stern warning they will regret taking and eating the fruit. It wasn't even 24 hours later they were back this time, with the law in tow, screaming up a fury that Pops tried to poison them. Pops just smiled and said, "I warned you not to come on my land and steal from me. Them berries aren't for eating." The cops were about to tell them to just F off and not come back when Pops said, "Oh, wait a minute." Pops came out with all his licenses packed in a neat little file folder, licensing his land that was already zoned for agricultural use as a licensed food production farm. The cops' eyes lit up like, "Oh, I know what you're getting at." You see, up here in Canada, it's a bit of a big crime to steal from a farm, even more so if it's got all the licenses to produce food. At this point, I was out on the porch watching everything go down. The lawman screamed at them to sit their butts down while he called backup. They were taken off our land in cuffs. So not only did they get a mouthful of human waste-filled berries, but walked out getting over a $10,000 fine. Really and truly, the only way to wrap up this story is to sit back and think about Pops walking away from this whole situation with a shit-eating grin. This next story comes to us from C. Kentner4212. I was told to do what I needed to do, so I did it. Let's jump right in. This is very recent. I was living in a very bad part of a major metropolitan city that has lots of bad parts. After I moved in, I started noticing a lot of things that were unsafe. Most of the things I brushed aside because they didn't necessarily affect me. 3 things I complained about were the fact that the common areas in most of the bedrooms had no smoke detectors. Then, because I get home when it's very dark, I complained about the porch lights not working. I was promised over and over that this would be fixed, but it never was. I pressed harder and threatened to call the city. I also withheld my rent at this point. The landlord told me, "There's nothing wrong with the house, do what you need to do." So I did. I called the city. An inspector came out and I showed him around the property. There were areas I couldn't give him access to, like the garage or the other tenants' rooms. He took lots of pictures and pointed out dozens of safety issues and building code violations. Turns out, this slumlord converted a 2-story house, 4-bed, 2-bath, into a 3-story house with 9 bedrooms and 9 bathrooms, with no permits from the city. He also had the home classified as an owner-occupied single-family home, although it was clearly not, as there was no owner occupancy and there were 10 unrelated roommates. The landlord harassed me through the whole process. She took my parking spot away and pitted other roommates against me. To make matters worse, she told everyone I wasn't paying rent. So now I have these bees ganging up on me. It was so bad that I couldn't be in any of the common areas for even 1 minute without being harassed. I also got a bunch of notices accusing me of random things and an eviction notice because I wasn't paying rent. The report from the city came out and it had over a dozen violations, including some very serious ones. It was going to cost him tens of thousands of dollars to repair the house to get it up to standard. The house started to become safer. There were smoke detectors, railings for the stairs, working porch lights, a carbon monoxide alarm, and he was forced to put a railing on a balcony that had none. Through all of this, he's making $10,000 per month in rent, charging for parking, and there's another large house on the property that he's renting. Plus, he has multiple homes, 90 tenants in total. This guy was making tons of money, but somehow the sentiment among some of the roommates was, "How could you do this to this poor old man?" My case went to court, and I got more time to find legal help. By the time the second hearing came along, another notice had been given, as they got access to the entire house. Plus, they were still in violation and had not cured all the problems, so they got fined daily. Then, my court date was a week away, and his attorney started to try and negotiate with me. I was asking for $16,000, and they knew I was going to get it because they were going to lose. I ended up settling for $7,000 and 30 days to move out, plus 8 months of rent forgiveness. I just did what I had to do. Laugh out loud. I honestly think the landlord got off easy in this case. I mean, the safety of everybody in that house was at risk because none of the building work was done to code. I was thinking like fines in the $100,000 range and maybe even a ban on renting by the tribunal. I don't know, something like that. Glad OP got to walk away with a little bit of money though. That definitely makes it easier to get into another place. Check out all 3 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and we'll see you tomorrow.